Elon Musk stood at the podium, the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. The bright lights of the press room flickered overhead, casting long shadows across his sharp, calculating face. His eyes darted across the crowd of reporters and photographers, all waiting for him to speak. It had been months since any public address like this one, and in a way, this moment felt different. This wasn't just another business announcement or the reveal of a new product. No, this was far more personal. And it was about to shake everything the world thought it knew about him. "Thank you all for joining me today," Musk's voice rang out, strong but slightly strained. He paused, as if searching for the right words, before continuing. "Today, I have something to share with you that will change everything you think you know about my family, and about me." A murmur rippled through the room, reporters shifting in their seats. There had been whispers in the media over the past few days, cryptic rumors circulating about a revelation involving Musk's family, but no one knew exactly what to expect. This wasn't a statement about Mars, Tesla, or even SpaceX. This was something much more intimate. And the more Musk spoke, the more it became clear that this wasn't going to be a typical corporate announcement. He exhaled sharply. "A few days ago, I received a message from a source deep in Greenland. It contained information about my son, information I never expected to hear, and information that could change the course of everything." Gasps echoed through the room as reporters leaned forward, their pens ready to catch every word. Musk wasn't known for his public vulnerability, and certainly not for discussing his family. He was a visionary, a disruptor, a man of business. But now, the revelation of a secret so profound, so shocking, was threatening to unravel everything. Musk's calm exterior betrayed the storm brewing just beneath the surface. "Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from," Musk added, breaking the tension slightly. "This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?" The reporters stared at him, unsure of how to respond to his sudden personal query. But he wasn't done. In fact, this was just the beginning. "I'll spare you the details of how this information came to me. But trust me when I say that it was something I never could have imagined. A secret, buried for years, has now surfaced, one that involves my son, a part of my family I've kept largely out of the public eye." Musk paused, allowing the silence to grow, as if preparing to drop a bombshell. His hands trembled slightly as he set the paper he was holding down on the podium. "What I am about to tell you, I did not know. And I will never have the answers to why it was hidden from me. But this revelation could change not just my life, but the way you all look at the Musk family." The room fell into an eerie silence. Musk's gaze met the crowd, and for a split second, it was as if time stood still. The reporters exchanged looks, unsure of what they had just heard. Musk stepped back from the podium and motioned for the screen behind him to come to life. The projector flickered, and an image appeared, a satellite photo of Greenland. A remote, icy land, filled with glaciers and snow, far from the buzzing tech hubs and rocket launch pads Musk was known for. "This is Greenland," he said quietly, his voice now more measured. "The place where everything changed for me." Another image appeared on the screen, this one of a small village, far away from the bustling cities of the world. It was here, Musk revealed, where the information about his son had originated, a secret research project hidden for years in the icy expanse of Greenland. The village, located near a facility Musk had never heard of before, had been the setting for something that had begun when his son was just a child. Musk's son, who had always kept a low profile, had somehow become entwined with a project Musk had no idea existed. And that was the core of the revelation. The information was linked to a mysterious scientific initiative, one that Musk had never signed off on, nor had he ever been aware of. But why Greenland? Why was my son involved in something so secret? Musk's voice cracked slightly as the realization of what was at stake began to sink in. "I have no answers. Not yet." The media was in a frenzy now, each reporter trying to outdo the other with questions. But Musk remained calm, a flicker of resolve in his eyes. He was used to the spotlight, but this was something different. This was personal. To be clear, he said, the details of what's happening are still unclear. But this discovery has set off a chain of events that none of us could have anticipated. And it's forcing me to confront my own past, my family's past, and a reality that I've spent years trying to avoid. Musk's eyes hardened. You might be wondering why I didn't speak about this sooner. Why I didn't share the news as soon as I received it. The truth is, I didn't know how. I didn't want to believe it. But the truth has a way of coming out, and now, I must face it head-on. The room was still, and for a moment, there was only the sound of Musk's breathing, steady but heavy. This was a man facing a crisis unlike any he had ever encountered, and no amount of wealth or technology could shield him from the unraveling of his personal life. I don't know what the future holds, Musk said, his voice lowering as he met the gaze of the reporters one last time. But I can promise you this, I will get to the bottom of this. I will find out what happened to my son in Greenland, and I will do whatever it takes to protect him. With that, he turned and walked off the stage, the murmurs of the press following him out the door. The lights of the room dimmed as the reporters scrambled to piece together the mystery that had just been laid before them. As Elon Musk left the room, the weight of the revelation hung in the air. The world had just learned something about him, a secret that could change everything. And the question lingered, what would happen next? The story was just beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk was not the kind of man who needed introductions. He had become a household name, his ventures and innovations shaping the very future of technology. From the electric cars of Tesla to the rockets of SpaceX, Musk had become synonymous with the idea of progress, of pushing humanity beyond its limits. But despite his worldwide fame, there was always more to the man than the public ever saw. Beneath the cold, calculating businessman who made headlines, there was a father, a man with dreams, failures, and a complex history that few knew. To understand the gravity of the revelation that had rocked his world, it was important to know where Musk had come from. After all, everything was connected. The past, the present, and the future, each of those had a role in the drama now unfolding before the world. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, Musk was always different. He had a mind that craved understanding, a thirst for knowledge that was unquenchable. As a child, he devoured books on everything from science to philosophy, and it wasn't long before his intellect outpaced that of most people around him. He didn't fit in with the other kids, often retreating into the world of his thoughts, where he dreamed of creating things that could change the world. But his early life wasn't without its struggles. Musk's parents divorced when he was young, and he often found himself at odds with his father, a man Musk later described as emotionally distant and difficult to connect with. His mother, Mae Musk, was a strong presence in his life, a model of resilience and independence. Despite the challenges, she encouraged him to pursue his dreams, even if they seemed far-fetched. At the age of 17, Musk moved to Canada to attend Queen's University, before transferring to the University of Pennsylvania, where he would ultimately earn degrees in both economics and physics. But it wasn't the academic accolades that made Musk stand out, it was his relentless drive. In the 1990s, he co-founded Zip2, a company that would eventually be sold for nearly $300 million. That was just the beginning. From there came X.com, which would later evolve into PayPal, and, of course, the ventures that defined his legacy, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and the Boring Company. Along the way, Musk became known as a visionary, a man who could see the future and bend it to his will. But it wasn't always smooth sailing. Musk had faced failure after failure, his early ventures barely scraping by, SpaceX nearly going bankrupt, Tesla fighting against skepticism in the car industry. Yet, no matter how many times he was knocked down, he got back up. His determination, his almost obsessive belief that the future could be shaped through technology, drove him forward. But what the public didn't know was that even this visionary had a private life, one filled with complexity and contradictions. Musk's personal relationships were far from perfect. His marriages, both to Canadian author Justine Musk and actress Tallulah Riley, ended in divorce. But the most important relationships in his life were those with his children. Musk had 5 sons with Justine, a marriage that ended in 2008. Their first child, Nevada, tragically passed away from sudden infant death syndrome, a loss that devastated Musk. It was a wound that never fully healed. After his divorce from Justine, Musk married Tallulah Riley twice, in 2010 and again in 2013, but their relationship was tumultuous. Despite his intense focus on his companies and the future, Musk seemed to struggle with balancing his professional ambitions with his personal life. Yet, through all the ups and downs, his children remained his center of gravity. He spoke of them with love, though his work often kept him distant from them. Still, Musk made efforts to be present in their lives, even if those moments were fleeting. Among his children, the one who stood out was his son Xaea-12, whom he shared with musician Grimes. Their relationship was unconventional in the public eye, and so was the naming of their child. The name Xaea-12 sparked a global conversation, with many wondering what it meant, how to pronounce it, and why Musk and Grimes had chosen it. But for Musk, it was just another example of his unconventional approach to life. He wanted to raise his children to think for themselves, to not be bound by societal norms. Despite his public persona, Musk had always been protective of his children. He rarely spoke about them in detail, keeping their lives out of the spotlight. He was determined to let them grow up in a world where they could explore their own paths without the burden of his fame. But now, everything had changed. The revelation from Greenland was a stark reminder that his family, his most personal world, could no longer remain hidden behind the walls he had carefully built. As Musk prepared to confront the reality of what was happening, he found himself grappling with a torrent of emotions. The truth was, he wasn't sure how to process what he was learning. He had always been a man of logic and reason, but now, there was no logic in what was unfolding before him. His son, the one person he had tried to shield from the public eye, was at the center of a mystery that could destroy everything Musk had worked for. The idea that something so monumental could be connected to his son was almost too much to bear. Musk had always been able to separate his personal and professional lives. He had learned to compartmentalize the chaos of his ventures, the pressure of leading multiple companies, and the loneliness that came with being in the public eye. But this was different. This was personal. In the days that followed the press conference, Musk took some time to reflect on his life, his choices, and his relationships. He thought about his children, about the father he had been and the father he still hoped to be. It was hard to ignore the nagging feeling that perhaps he had missed something important along the way, that maybe his drive to change the world had come at the expense of something even more precious, his connection with his family. But now, the truth had come to light, and there was no turning back. He had to face it, whether he was ready or not. His journey to uncover the secrets about his son had just begun, and it would take him into the heart of a mystery that could change the future in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. The world was waiting for answers. And Musk, for once, was uncertain of what those answers might be. Elon Musk sat at his desk in the quiet of his private office, the faint hum of technology all around him. His fingers drummed absent-mindedly on the surface of the polished wood, his mind far from the business at hand. The gravity of the recent revelations weighed heavily on him, pulling his thoughts away from rockets and electric cars and instead toward a place far colder, far more isolated, Greenland. The image of the satellite photo still lingered in his mind. The vast, frozen landscape that stretched for miles. The remote research facility nestled there. And the haunting idea that somehow, his son, Xaea-12, had become entangled in a mystery that could change the course of history. Musk had always been a man of logic and reason, but now he found himself caught in the strangling grip of uncertainty. The details were murky. The initial message from his informant in Greenland had been cryptic at best. It spoke of a secret scientific project buried beneath the ice, one that had been in motion for years, with connections to Musk's family that were still unclear. All he had received was a single photograph of the facility, and a note that read, "Your son is involved. And so is your past." Musk had no choice but to investigate further. His mind raced, connecting dots, but each link he tried to draw seemed to only create more questions. Who was behind this project? How had his son been caught up in it? And most importantly, what did this have to do with his own family history? His thoughts were interrupted by a sharp knock on the door. "Come in," Musk called, his voice tight. A man in his early 40s, clean-shaven and impeccably dressed, entered the room. He was Greg, a close advisor who had worked with Musk for over a decade. Greg's presence had always been a stabilizing force in Musk's chaotic world of high-stakes decisions. However, today, his expression was one Musk couldn't quite read. "Sir," Greg began, standing at attention, "I've been going over the intel you requested. We've traced the research facility in Greenland to a group called the Anomaly Project." Musk raised an eyebrow. "Anomaly Project?" Greg nodded, pulling up a series of documents on the tablet he carried. The screen displayed images and details of the project, each one more alarming than the last. Anomaly is a shadow organization, operating in several countries, but mostly in isolated regions. They claim to be researching climate change and developing sustainable technologies, but from what we've gathered, that's just a front. Behind the scenes, they're working on something far more significant. Something that, according to some sources, involves genetic research and possibly even experiments related to advanced brain functions. Musk leaned forward, his gaze locked on the tablet. "Genetic research?" His voice was quiet but sharp, laced with suspicion. "And my son?" Greg hesitated. "That's where it gets complicated. XAEA-12 was never officially linked to the project, but it appears that his DNA was somehow involved, perhaps through a surrogate research initiative. The records we've managed to access suggest that your son's genetic makeup was key to a test they were running. But it's not clear whether he was an active participant, or if his involvement was incidental." Musk's mind was racing. How could this be? His son was supposed to be safe, away from the scrutiny and dangers of his work. Yet here he was, at the center of a covert project that might have been manipulating his very biology. "What do they want with him?" Musk asked, his voice thick with growing concern. "I don't know yet," Greg replied. "But I've sent a team to track down more information. The facility is off the grid. It's not easy to infiltrate, but we're doing everything we can. We'll know more soon." Musk nodded slowly, his mind swirling with anger and disbelief. The idea that his son might be involved in something so sinister, so dangerous, was almost too much to bear. But he knew he had to find out more. He had to protect him, no matter the cost. "Get me everything you can," Musk ordered. "And keep me posted. I'm going to Greenland." Greg's eyes widened in surprise. "Sir, it's not safe. The facility is heavily guarded. If you go there." "I'm going," Musk cut him off, his voice unwavering. "I'm not going to sit around while someone toys with my family. Get me the details. I'll handle the rest." Greg hesitated for a moment, before nodding. "Understood." As Greg left the room, Musk felt the weight of the decision settle over him. This was no longer about business or technology. This was about his family, his son. He had always been a man who could handle pressure, who thrived in the face of impossible odds. But this? This was different. This was personal. The hours that followed were a blur of frantic activity. Musk began assembling a team of experts, security specialists, scientists, and trusted advisors, all of whom would accompany him on the dangerous journey to Greenland. He knew he couldn't face this alone. But even with all the resources at his disposal, he felt a deep sense of unease. What if the project in Greenland had already crossed a line? What if it had already done something irreversible to his son? The thought gnawed at him. Musk wasn't the type to express vulnerability, but the anxiety he felt was unlike anything he had ever experienced. This wasn't just another challenge, another test of his ingenuity and resourcefulness. This was about his legacy, his family, and the future of the person he loved most in the world. As the team prepared for departure, Musk sat alone in his office, staring out of the window at the darkening sky. His mind wandered back to XAEA-12, to the little boy who had been born into such an unconventional life, to the one person who had always remained a mystery to him, despite the bond they shared. How could this happen? How had his child become part of a web that could potentially destroy everything? He took a deep breath and stood up, his resolve hardening like steel. He would find the truth. No matter the cost. The journey to Greenland would take him to a place he never thought he'd have to confront. And as the hours ticked by, Elon Musk began to realize that the secrets buried beneath the ice weren't just about science or technology. They were about him. About who he was as a man and as a father. And he would stop at nothing to uncover them. The questions were growing, the stakes higher than ever. What exactly had happened in Greenland? What had been done to his son? And why had no one, told him the truth? As the plane began its descent toward the icy expanse of Greenland, Musk prepared himself for a confrontation unlike any he had ever faced. The truth was out there, buried beneath the ice, and he was determined to find it, whatever it might reveal. The frigid air of Greenland hit Elon Musk as soon as he stepped off the plane. It wasn't the cold he was concerned about, but the unknown. Everything in his life had always been driven by logic, calculation, and precision, yet here he was, flying into one of the most remote, unforgiving places on Earth, chasing shadows. Shadows that were growing darker by the minute. The team had already set up a temporary base camp a few miles from the research facility. Musk's boots crunched against the snow as he walked toward the convoy of SUVs that were waiting to take them closer to the heart of the mystery. He glanced up at the endless white expanse of Greenland's ice cap. To an outsider, it was a serene landscape, stark in its beauty. But to Musk, the coldness now felt like a symbol of the detachment that had taken hold of his life in recent weeks. He had always kept his personal life at a distance, focusing on the future and his mission to change the world, but this was personal. Greg, his trusted advisor, approached him, looking more serious than usual. "Sir, we're almost there. The satellite scans are clear. The facility is just up ahead." Musk nodded. "Good. We move quickly." As they drove toward the facility, the barren landscape around them seemed to stretch on forever. There were no signs of life, no civilization for miles. Musk had always known that some of the world's most groundbreaking discoveries had taken place in isolated locations like this, but the isolation felt different now. It felt ominous. The cold, the silence, it all seemed to press in on him, amplifying the anxiety gnawing at his stomach. When they arrived at the facility, the first thing Musk noticed was the security. It was unlike anything he had seen before. There were armed guards stationed at every entrance, surveillance drones patrolling the skies, and infrared cameras scanning the perimeter. Musk wasn't the kind of person to be intimidated by security. After all, he had faced down some of the most challenging odds in his career, but this felt different. It felt as though someone was hiding something they didn't want anyone to find. They parked near a large hangar-like structure that blended into the ice and snow, almost as if the facility was trying to be invisible. It was built to withstand the harsh environment, with reinforced walls and a thick layer of insulation. The structure was small compared to some of the tech hubs Musk was accustomed to, but there was an eerie, deliberate quality to it. It was designed to be undetectable, yet it stood out like a sore thumb in this frozen wasteland. "Stay alert," Musk muttered to his team as they gathered their equipment and prepared to enter the building. As they approached the entrance, Greg spoke up again, his voice low. "I've arranged for a small team to infiltrate the facility. They'll try to get inside and gather intel. If there's anything we need to know, they'll find it." Musk gave a curt nod, but his mind was elsewhere. The thought of his son, of XAEA-12, being part of something like this, something covert and dangerous, was almost too much to bear. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more at play here than just a simple scientific experiment. There were forces at work in this facility that Musk couldn't yet understand, forces that might have been shaping the future of humanity without anyone realizing it. Inside the facility, the temperature was starkly different from the freezing cold outside. The interior was warm, almost sterile in its clinical cleanliness. There were no windows, no natural light, just long, white hallways and blinking lights overhead. The air felt thick with tension, as though something monumental had happened in this place, something Musk couldn't yet put his finger on. "Where is the lab?" Musk asked, his voice steady but laced with urgency. Greg pointed to a nearby hallway. "Down this way." As they moved deeper into the facility, the eerie quiet pressed in on them. The walls were lined with various scientific equipment, most of it unfamiliar to Musk. But it wasn't the technology that caught his attention, it was the people. The scientists, the researchers who were working here, seemed distant, almost robotic. Their eyes didn't meet Musk's as he walked by. They were too focused on their tasks, too immersed in whatever was happening behind these walls. They reached a large, locked door at the end of the hallway. It was reinforced, with a biometric scanner beside it. Musk stepped forward, his eyes narrowing at the door. This was the heart of the facility, the place where the most sensitive work was being done. The most dangerous work. Greg scanned the door's biometric system, but there was a moment of hesitation before the lock clicked open. Musk pushed the door open slowly, and they stepped into a large, high-tech lab. It was dimly lit, but the faint glow of monitors illuminated the room. The scent of sterile air and chemicals filled Musk's nostrils as his eyes scanned the space. And then he saw it. In the center of the room stood a large tank, one that resembled something out of a science fiction movie. The tank was filled with a strange, viscous fluid, and inside it was a form, human-like, but not entirely. Musk's breath caught in his throat as he moved closer, inspecting the creature within. It was a child. A boy. But not just any boy. There was something familiar about him, something that made Musk's heart skip a beat. His son's face. The child in the tank looked almost identical to XAEA-12, his facial features, the shape of his eyes, the way his hair curled slightly at the edges. But this child, this boy was different. He had been altered. His skin had an unnatural hue, his features slightly exaggerated, and there were wires and tubes attached to him, running into the tank, feeding into the strange fluid. Musk's mind raced. This couldn't be real. It couldn't be happening. His son was not here. This was some kind of cruel joke, a nightmare he couldn't wake from. Is this him? Musk's voice trembled as he turned to Greg, his entire body rigid with shock. Greg didn't answer right away. He simply walked closer to the tank, scanning the monitors. "It's him," Greg said softly, his voice filled with disbelief. "But this isn't just your son. This is something else. Something they've done to him. The project, the experiments, they were designed to push human limits, to unlock potential beyond anything we can comprehend." Musk's mind was spinning. The room felt like it was closing in on him. His son, his child, was in this tank, being used as some kind of experiment. He had no idea how this could have happened, how someone could have manipulated his family in such a way. His thoughts were a blur, but one thing was clear, this was far worse than he had imagined. "Get him out of here," Musk ordered, his voice cold and steely. "Now." The team scrambled into action, but Musk couldn't tear his eyes away from the boy in the tank. This wasn't just about him anymore. This wasn't just about protecting his son. It was about stopping whatever this project was, and making sure no one else ever had to endure what his family had been subjected to. The answers were just beginning to unfold, but Musk knew one thing: the deeper he went, the more dangerous this journey would become. And he was ready to face whatever came next. The lab was silent except for the soft hum of machines that surrounded Musk and his team. The sight of the boy, his son, or someone who looked disturbingly like him, still haunted Musk's thoughts, even as he tried to regain his composure. His instincts told him that this was no mere coincidence. The experiments, the manipulation of his child's genetic material, the clandestine nature of it all, it wasn't just a case of scientific curiosity gone wrong. There was something deeper, darker, at play. Something that Musk hadn't anticipated. The facility was a maze of high-tech laboratories, secure corridors, and tightly guarded rooms. But the lab they had entered, the one with the strange tank, was by far the most unsettling. It wasn't just the tank or the eerie resemblance between the boy inside it and his son. No, it was the realization that someone, somewhere, had been pulling strings in his life, controlling variables that Musk had never even known existed. As the team worked to retrieve any data that could explain the tank's contents and the boy inside, Musk remained frozen, staring at the figure in the chamber. His mind spun. If XAEA-12 had somehow been manipulated, if he had been part of this experiment, how could Musk have missed it? How could anyone have kept such a thing from him? He prided himself on his awareness, his control over every aspect of his enterprises. But this was something he could never have imagined. Greg, ever the calm and collected advisor, approached Musk, his face a mask of tension. "Sir, we've secured the data. It looks like this project, if you can call it that, started years ago. They've been tracking potential candidates, specifically children with certain genetic traits. Your son's involvement, it wasn't random. He was chosen." Musk didn't answer right away, his eyes never leaving the boy in the tank. His throat felt dry, the words thick in his mouth. Chosen? For what? Greg swallowed. That's what we're trying to figure out. This facility, it's not just a research lab. It's a place where they're studying human enhancement. Genetic manipulation, cognitive augmentation. But not in the way you think. They're attempting to design humans who are, how do I put this, better. More resilient. More intelligent. They believe they can enhance human potential to the point where it becomes, transcendent. Musk felt the words sink in like ice. Transcendent? His voice cracked with disbelief. You're telling me they've been using my son as part of some genetic experiment to create superhumans? Greg hesitated. Yes, and no. It's not just about making them stronger or smarter. They believe that by altering certain aspects of human genetics, they can create individuals who can transcend traditional human limitations, physically, mentally, even emotionally. But there's more. From the data we've uncovered, there's a specific sequence of genes that they've been targeting. A sequence they believe holds the key to unlocking untapped potential in human beings. And your son's genetic makeup, it fits. Musk's mind reeled. The implications were staggering. XAEA-12, the boy who had always been at the center of his life, had been a subject, no, a specimen, of a vast experiment. An experiment that had been running for years, under his nose. And now, the boy in the tank. Was he the result of that experiment? Or was he something entirely different? Why didn't I know about any of this? Musk demanded, the anger in his voice rising. Why was this kept from me? Greg shifted uncomfortably. Because this project wasn't supposed to get out. It was buried. Hidden. Even from people like you. There are powerful forces behind this, people who don't want anyone to know the full extent of what's going on here. The words hit Musk like a blow to the chest. Powerful forces. People who had been operating in the shadows, controlling everything from behind the scenes. He had built his empire by outsmarting rivals, by innovating faster than anyone could keep up with him. But this? This was different. This wasn't a matter of business. This was a war on his family. Who are they? Musk asked, his voice a low growl. Who's running this? Greg hesitated again before speaking, his face tight with the knowledge he was about to impart. We don't know all the details yet, but, from the information we've gathered, it appears that there's a network of people behind the project, some government entities, some private corporations. But the people at the very top, they're untouchable. They've been manipulating not just your son, but other families, other children, for years. They're using genetic engineering as a means to create the perfect human being. And they'll stop at nothing to achieve it. Musk's blood ran cold as the realization hit him. This wasn't just about science. This was a full-blown conspiracy. A conspiracy that had reached into his life and used his own blood to further its cause. The idea that someone had been pulling the strings behind the scenes, controlling what was supposed to be his family's future, made him feel like he was drowning in a sea of betrayal. His eyes darted back to the tank. The boy inside it was still, almost lifeless, as though the world around him didn't matter. But to Musk, that stillness felt like a profound question, a question that had been haunting him for days. What had happened to XAEA-12? Was his son even the same person anymore? As he turned away from the tank, his jaw clenched with determination. We need to get out of here. Now. We have to find out who's behind this, and we need to make sure that this never happens again. To my son. Or anyone else. The urgency in Musk's voice snapped the team into action. They quickly began securing the data, dismantling the lab's equipment, and preparing to leave the facility. But Musk couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. That the more he uncovered, the more dangerous this situation became. Just as they were about to leave the lab, one of the security experts on Musk's team rushed in, looking pale and shaken. Sir, we've got a problem. We've been compromised. There are more people here. We're not alone. Musk's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean, we're not alone? The security expert swallowed hard. There's a backup team, hidden in the facility. And they're moving toward our position. We've got to go, now. Fear clutched at Musk's chest, but he quickly regained his composure. Get us out of here. Fast. They rushed through the hallways, moving as quickly as possible without drawing attention. The facility, which had once seemed so isolated and quiet, now felt like a trap, closing in around them. As they neared the exit, Musk's mind was spinning. He had come here to protect his son, to uncover the truth. But now, it was clear that there were even greater forces at play, forces that would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. And Musk had no intention of letting them win. The battle was just beginning. The cold wind whipped across the barren Greenlandic landscape as Musk and his team sprinted toward their extraction point. The base camp, the only place they could regroup and escape, was a few miles away. But the further they got from the facility, the more urgent the situation became. The enemy was closing in. Musk's breath came in ragged gasps as he tried to steady his thoughts. The revelation about the experiment, the connection to his son, it was all so overwhelming. He had always been a man of calculated risk, someone who could assess a situation and make a quick decision. But this? This was different. It wasn't just a mission. It was personal. Behind him, Greg was keeping pace, but his expression was tight with concern. Elon, we don't know who's after us, but we need to assume they have people in every direction. We can't take any chances. Musk nodded, his mind still reeling. How did they know we were here? That's what I'm trying to figure out, Greg said. The security breach is unlike anything I've seen before. They must have been tracking us the moment we landed. They reached the edge of the snowfield, where the base camp vehicles were parked, hidden behind a small ridge. The team quickly piled into the SUVs, the engines roaring to life as the wheels dug into the thick snow, sending sprays of white powder into the air. The tension was palpable. Musk sat in the front seat, eyes scanning the horizon, every nerve alert. As the convoy sped away from the facility, Musk's thoughts turned to the boy in the lab. The boy who looked like his son. What had they done to him? What were they trying to achieve? The deeper he delved into the mystery, the more twisted it seemed. Whoever had orchestrated this experiment, this project, was not playing by the rules. They were building something dangerous, something Musk couldn't allow to exist. "We can't stop now," Musk muttered under his breath. "We need to know everything. Who's behind this? Why were they targeting my family?" Greg was looking out the window, trying to get a read on their surroundings. "We'll get the answers, Elon. But first, we need to get out of this damn snowstorm. I've already called in the backup team. They'll be here soon, but we've got to make sure we're not followed." Musk's mind raced. They couldn't afford to be followed. The stakes were too high. It wasn't just his son's future at risk anymore, it was the future of humanity. If these people had the resources to manipulate genetics on such a scale, who knew what else they could do? How many others had they experimented on? What were the consequences of playing God with human DNA? His thoughts were interrupted as the convoy hit a particularly rough patch of snow, jolting everyone in the vehicles. The radios crackled, and Musk's pulse quickened. There was a warning in Greg's eyes. "We've got company," Greg said sharply. "Hold on." Suddenly, the sound of engines revving reached their ears. Musk glanced back through the rearview mirror, his stomach sinking. There were headlights cutting through the whiteout, fast approaching. At first, it seemed like a trick of the snowstorm, but as the vehicles drew closer, the shape of black SUVs became clearer. "We've been tracked," Musk said through clenched teeth. "Get us off the road. Now." The driver swerved to the left, avoiding a head-on collision as the convoy plunged into an even thicker section of snow, plowing through the frozen terrain. Musk could feel the tension building in his chest as they raced through the blinding storm. It was impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. "I'm not sure we can outrun them," Greg said, his voice tense. "Then we'll fight back," Musk snapped. "We can't let them catch us." The convoy made a sharp turn, heading toward a nearby mountain range, hoping the rough terrain would slow down their pursuers. Musk's grip tightened on the seat, his mind constantly calculating their next move. The snowstorm was a mixed blessing. It provided cover, but it also hindered their ability to see what was behind them. Through the thickening snow, Musk saw a flash of headlights closing in on them. The enemy was relentless. "Where's the backup?" Musk demanded, his voice sharp. Greg glanced at his phone, checking the GPS, "They should be here soon. Just hold on." Musk's heart was pounding in his chest. His thoughts flickered back to the boy in the tank. Whoever these people were, they had no idea who they were up against. Musk had faced down rockets, billions of dollars in debt, and some of the most powerful companies in the world. But this was personal. As the vehicles roared up the mountain path, Musk spotted a sharp turn ahead. He was about to give the order to take the turn faster when a loud crack echoed through the air. The sound of a gunshot. Musk whipped his head around, barely making out the silhouette of a figure perched high on a ridge, rifle in hand. The shot missed, but it was a warning. They were being hunted. "Go! Go! Go!" Musk shouted. The driver floored the accelerator, sending the SUV lurching forward. Musk's knuckles turned white as the landscape blurred around them. He needed to think quickly. They were too exposed on this open path. The mountain range ahead could offer some protection, but they had to lose their pursuers first. Ahead, Musk saw a narrow canyon cutting through the mountainside. A perfect place to hide. If they could get through it, they might have a chance to regroup. But it was risky. The narrow path could be a trap. "Turn into the canyon," Musk ordered, his voice firm. Without hesitation, the driver veered hard to the right, slamming the SUV into the canyon's opening. The convoy followed closely behind, the tires screeching as they fought to stay on course. The canyon walls closed in on both sides, leaving them little room to maneuver. But it was their only hope. Musk's eyes scanned the narrow passage. The sound of their engines echoed off the walls, amplifying the tension. They were trapped. If the enemy caught up, they wouldn't be able to escape. The canyon twisted and turned, the path growing tighter with every passing second. Musk's mind was still focused on the mission, on finding out who was behind this and how to stop them. But it wasn't just the mission anymore. It was survival. Then, through the thick snow and the twisting turns of the canyon, Musk saw a glimmer of hope, a way out. A small side path to the left. If they could take it, they could cut through to a remote part of the mountain range and lose their pursuers. Take the side path. Musk shouted. The driver slammed the wheel hard to the left, sending the SUV onto a rocky, uneven path. The others followed closely, but the terrain was even more treacherous now. Rocks and debris made it difficult to keep control, but Musk's instincts told him this was their only shot. As they barreled through the path, Musk felt a sense of urgency building inside him. They couldn't stop now. Not when they were so close to the truth. Not when everything was on the line. Behind them, the sound of enemy vehicles grew louder. Time was running out. The battle for his son, and for his life, was far from over. The side path they had veered onto was narrow and treacherous, the rocky terrain challenging their every move. Musk gripped the seat tightly, his body tensed with every jolt. The sound of the pursuing vehicles faded momentarily as the convoy moved deeper into the winding passage, but Musk knew better than to believe they had escaped. It was just a matter of time before the enemy caught up with them. He couldn't shake the image of the boy in the tank. The thought that his son might be tied to these dark forces only fueled his determination. Who were these people? What was their endgame? What had they done to XAEA-12? Greg, sitting beside him, was scanning the surroundings, his eyes flickering between the rearview mirror and the increasingly tight path. "We're not out of the woods yet," he said, his voice strained. "If we take this path too far, we'll end up cornered. We need to find a way to turn this around, fast." Musk didn't respond immediately, his mind still racing. The cold wind howled outside, snow swirling in the air, but inside the vehicle, the atmosphere was tense and suffocating. He needed answers, and he needed them quickly. "Do we have any backup?" Musk asked. Greg shook his head. "They're on their way, but it'll take time. We're too exposed out here." The convoy's tires screeched as the vehicles navigated a sharp curve, the path narrowing even more. Musk glanced ahead, his heart sinking as he saw a blockade of rocks up ahead. Someone had anticipated their move, someone who knew exactly where they were headed. "Hold on," the driver shouted, slamming the brakes as the SUV came to a screeching halt just before the pile of jagged rocks. The other vehicles barely avoided a collision, the convoy grinding to a stop. Musk's thoughts flickered to the boy again, his son. Was he out there somewhere, possibly at the mercy of whoever was behind this twisted experiment? Musk couldn't let them win. He couldn't let them control his family's fate. "Get out. Now." Musk barked, his voice sharp with urgency. The team quickly scrambled from the vehicles, their boots crunching in the snow as they moved quickly into the rocky alcove ahead. Musk's eyes darted around, searching for any way forward. The enemy wouldn't give up that easily. They knew exactly what they were after, Elon Musk, his family, and the project that had ensnared them all. "We can't stay here long," Greg said, looking over his shoulder. "They'll be closing in on us soon." Musk didn't need to be told twice. He had already scanned the environment, his mind working at full speed. In front of them was a series of narrow tunnels leading deeper into the mountain, barely wide enough for the vehicles to pass through. It was a risk, but it was their best shot at losing their pursuers. "We'll go through the tunnels," Musk ordered, already moving toward the opening. Greg hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "It's a gamble, but it's the only option." The convoy moved swiftly through the narrow passage, the sound of their tires echoing off the walls. They twisted and turned, following the path deeper into the mountain. Musk's thoughts swirled as they navigated the treacherous route. Who was behind this? Who was orchestrating everything from the shadows? He had his suspicions, but they didn't have the luxury of time to dig deeper right now. Suddenly, the sound of another gunshot rang out, followed by a deafening explosion. The ground trembled beneath them as a section of the tunnel ahead collapsed, sending a wave of dust and debris into the air. "Move!" Musk shouted, adrenaline coursing through his veins as he saw the smoke rising in the distance. "We can't stay here." The team pushed forward, their faces grim as they navigated the crumbling tunnel. They needed to find a way out before it was too late. The enemy was closing in, and every second they spent in the tunnel brought them closer to being trapped. As they moved deeper into the mountain, Greg's voice broke through the tension. "Elon, there's something you need to know." Musk glanced at him, narrowing his eyes. "What is it?" Greg hesitated, his expression troubled. "I've been going over the data we pulled from the lab. There's something I missed earlier, something important. The project, the one targeting your son, it's not just about genetics. It's about control." Musk's heart skipped a beat. "Control? What do you mean?" "The ultimate goal of this project is to create a new breed of humans, genetically engineered individuals who are not only stronger, smarter, and more resilient, but also more susceptible to manipulation. They're creating a generation of people who can be controlled, conditioned to follow orders without question. And they want XAEA-12 because of his potential to break through those genetic limitations." Musk felt the weight of Greg's words sink in. His son, his flesh and blood, was the target of a ruthless experiment designed to strip away his autonomy, to reduce him to nothing more than a puppet in someone else's game. The thought of it was unbearable. "They want to control him," Musk muttered, barely able to speak. "And now they want me too." "Not just you," Greg said. "They want everything you've built. Everything you stand for. They want to manipulate the future itself, and they'll stop at nothing to get it." A chilling silence fell over the group as they continued through the tunnel. The sound of their footsteps echoed against the stone walls, a constant reminder of the danger they were in. But Musk's mind was focused on one thing, getting his son back, and taking down those responsible for this experiment. As they emerged from the tunnels and into a large, open cavern, Musk's thoughts turned to the next move. The enemy was close. They had to make their stand now. But they weren't going to fight alone. There was someone out there, someone who had been tracking them. Musk had seen the shadow of a figure watching from a distance, someone who had been following the trail, waiting for the right moment to strike. A new ally, perhaps. Or a new enemy. "We'll need to get to higher ground," Musk said. "We have to find a way to hold them off until the backup arrives." Greg nodded, his eyes scanning the cavern ahead. "There's a ridge up ahead. We can set up there." Musk took a deep breath. "Let's move." They started making their way toward the ridge, knowing full well that every step brought them closer to the final confrontation. Whoever was behind this had underestimated him. And now, he was going to make them regret it. The race against time was far from over. But this time, Musk was ready. The cavern ahead stretched out like a hollow heart in the mountain, its walls jagged and uneven. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the echo of their footsteps and the faint murmur of the wind outside. Musk led the team toward the ridge, every nerve alert, every instinct screaming that danger was close. The darkness of the cavern seemed to close in around them, a reminder of just how far from safety they truly were. As they neared the ridge, Musk scanned the rocky outcrop. It was a good vantage point, a narrow, elevated ledge that could provide them with a view of anyone approaching. But it also left them exposed. They needed to be quick. "Set up a perimeter," Musk ordered, his voice low but firm. "Greg, check the back. Make sure no one's following." Greg nodded and moved off, leaving Musk alone with his thoughts. They had to hold their ground until the backup team arrived. But Musk couldn't stop thinking about the boy. His son. Was he still alive? What had they done to him? A sense of helplessness threatened to overtake him, but Musk pushed it down. He couldn't afford to feel weak now, not when so much was at stake. The weight of the situation pressed down on him. The enemy was closing in. Every moment brought them closer to confrontation. Yet, there was still one question that haunted him: who was behind all of this? Who could have the resources, the will, and the ambition to orchestrate such a sophisticated operation? Before Musk could dwell too much on the question, Greg returned, his face grim. "They're getting closer," Greg said. "We need to move now. They know exactly where we are." Musk didn't hesitate. He turned toward the ridge and began climbing the narrow, rocky path, the rest of the team following closely behind. As they ascended, the sound of the storm outside grew louder, the wind howling against the mountain as if urging them to hurry. Just as they reached the top, a figure appeared in the distance, moving with eerie precision through the cavern's shadows. Musk's heart raced. Who was it? Another enemy? Or someone who had come to help? The figure stopped, standing perfectly still in the dark. Musk's eyes narrowed as he tried to make out any distinguishing features. But the person was cloaked in darkness, their face hidden. "Who's there?" Musk called out, his voice commanding. The figure took a slow step forward, and for the first time, Musk caught a glimpse of their face, familiar, but not entirely. A pair of sharp, calculating eyes met his. It was a woman, young, yet with a presence that commanded respect. "Don't shoot," the woman said, her voice calm and steady, but with an edge of urgency. "I'm not your enemy." Musk hesitated for a moment, his hand still hovering near his sidearm. He didn't trust easily, especially not now. But something about this woman, something in the way she moved, in the way she spoke, made him lower his weapon. "Who are you?" Musk demanded, trying to steady his voice. "My name is Ava," she said, taking a few more steps closer, her eyes darting around the cavern. "I've been tracking you for days." Musk's brow furrowed. "Tracking me?" "Yes," Ava replied. "I know who's after you, and I know what they want." Greg, still wary, stepped closer to Musk. "How do we know we can trust you?" Ava looked at Greg, her gaze sharp. "You don't. But right now, I'm the only one who can help you." Musk studied her for a moment, weighing the decision. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, but the situation was dire. They needed every advantage they could get. If this woman knew something, anything that could help them survive, it was worth listening to. "Why should we believe you?" Musk asked. Ava's eyes softened for a brief moment, as if she understood the gravity of the question. "Because I've been on the inside," she said quietly. "I used to work for them. The people behind this project. I know what they're capable of. And I know what they want from you." Musk's pulse quickened. "You were part of the experiment?" Ava nodded. "At one point. But I got out. I learned too much, things I wasn't supposed to. They came after me, too. I had to disappear." Musk's mind raced. Someone on the inside? This was the break they needed. But it was dangerous. Trusting someone with such knowledge could be a fatal mistake. "What do they want from me?" Musk asked, his voice tight. "They want more than your company, Musk. They want control over the future itself. They've been building a new generation, genetically enhanced, conditioned for obedience. But your son, XAEA-12, he's different. They see his potential to break free of their control. They think they can use him to perfect their project, but what they don't realize is that he could destroy everything they've built." Musk's breath caught in his throat. Everything she said made sense. The project. The boy. His son. Everything was connected. But the question was, could they stop it? Could they stop a force so powerful, so relentless? "What do you want from us?" Greg asked, his voice sharp. "Why are you helping us?" Ava glanced around, her expression serious. "Because I know how this ends. They won't stop until they have what they want. But you don't have to play their game. You can turn the tables on them. You can take back control. Musk studied her carefully. The weight of her words hung in the air, but there was something about her, something genuine in her eyes, that made him believe she was telling the truth. But the stakes were high. They were in too deep, and there was no turning back. Help us, Musk said, finally making up his mind. Tell us everything. And we'll take it from there. Ava nodded. I'll tell you what I know. But you need to understand one thing, you can't do this alone. You need allies. Musk glanced at Greg, who nodded in agreement. We'll take all the help we can get. Ava took a deep breath. Then let's get to work. The countdown is already ticking. As they gathered around, forming a plan, Musk felt the weight of what was to come settle in his chest. There was no room for failure. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about taking down a shadowy empire that had manipulated lives, controlled destinies, and threatened everything Musk held dear. And now, with the help of a mysterious ally, they would fight back. The dim light of the cavern cast long, eerie shadows on the rocky walls as Musk, Greg, and Ava gathered their bearings. The air was cold and thick with the weight of the task ahead, but there was a certain resolve now that hadn't been there before. Ava, despite her mysterious past, seemed to be the key to unlocking the answers they so desperately needed. Musk stared at her, his mind racing. Everything she had said was so surreal, so far beyond what he had imagined. A new generation of genetically enhanced humans, designed for obedience, created for control. His son, XAEA-12, the target of their twisted ambition. He could feel the fire of determination burning within him, fueled by the need to protect his family and stop whatever dark forces were at work. How do we stop them? Musk's voice was low, steady. The urgency was there, but there was no time for panic. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. Ava's expression grew serious, her eyes narrowing as if she had been anticipating this question. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. The first thing you need to understand is that this isn't just about genetics. The program isn't simply making superhumans, it's about creating an army that can be manipulated and controlled. The people behind it, those funding it, pulling the strings, they've developed a sophisticated network of surveillance, influence, and manipulation. And they're using every piece of technology at their disposal. Musk nodded, already trying to piece together the information she was giving him. You said you were on the inside. What happened? Why did you leave? Ava's face tightened for a moment, her gaze distant. I didn't leave by choice. After working on the project for a while, I began to see the bigger picture. They weren't just trying to create better humans, they were building an army. And the ultimate goal wasn't just about profit. It was power. World domination. They wanted to control the future, and they saw people like your son as the key to unlocking that future. But the longer I stayed, the more I realized I couldn't be a part of that. I knew too much. Who are they? Greg's voice cut through the tension, his tone sharp. Who's really behind this? Ava hesitated before responding. It's not just one person. It's a network, a powerful group of individuals with ties to governments, corporations, and secret organizations. Some are in plain sight, and others are hidden in the shadows, pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Think of it as a web that stretches across the world. And your son is at the center of it. Musk clenched his fists, his mind racing with 1,000 questions. What do they want from him? Control, Ava repeated, her voice cold and matter-of-fact. They want to manipulate his DNA, enhance his abilities, and condition him to be their tool. But they're not just experimenting on him, they're also trying to replicate his abilities, to create more like him. Your son is a unique genetic anomaly. If they can harness that, they will have the power to shape the future in any way they choose. Musk's stomach twisted. His son was not just a pawn in some cruel game. He was the prize in a high-stakes battle for control of humanity's future. We can't let that happen, Musk said, his voice steel. Ava nodded. We need to get you access to their central database. It's the heart of the operation, their control center. The information inside will give you everything you need, names, locations, the entire network structure. If you can take that down, you can collapse the whole thing. But how do we get to it? Greg asked. We're not exactly in a position to waltz in and ask for access. Ava glanced around, scanning their surroundings. She was calculating, always thinking 2 steps ahead. I've been tracking their movements for months, she said. I've identified a few safe houses and points of contact. We need to get to one of them. It's a hidden facility that holds the access codes to their main database. But getting to it won't be easy. The place is heavily guarded, and they'll be expecting someone to come for it soon. Musk exhaled, considering the enormity of the task ahead. And you think we can break in? Get those codes? Ava met his gaze, her expression unwavering. If we move fast, and if we stay under their radar, yes. But we can't do it alone. We need to bring in the right people. Allies, Musk said, understanding. People we can trust. Exactly, Ava said, her eyes flickering with resolve. I know some people who can help, underground groups, hackers, former agents. We'll need their skills to infiltrate the system and disable their surveillance. This won't be a simple heist. We'll need to be smart, and we'll need to act quickly. Greg, who had been silent for a moment, spoke up. I don't like the idea of bringing in strangers. We can't afford to trust the wrong people. Ava's eyes softened slightly, but there was still a sharpness to her tone. I get it. But this isn't just about us. This is about stopping something bigger than any of us. And we don't have the luxury of time. Musk weighed the options, his mind running through every possibility. His first instinct was to protect his son, to take down those responsible for this plot. But there was also the growing reality that they would need more than just their own skills to pull this off. They needed allies, people with knowledge and resources they didn't have. Okay, Musk said, his voice steady. We'll do it your way. We'll bring in the people we need. But we're going after that database. We're going to take them down. Ava gave a curt nod. Then let's get moving. With the plan set into motion, they began their trek toward the facility that held the access codes. The journey ahead would be treacherous, but Musk felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were no longer running from the enemy. They were fighting back. As they navigated through the twisting tunnels and across harsh, unforgiving terrain, Musk's mind didn't just focus on the mission. It focused on the people who were depending on him, his son, the future, and the world that would be forever changed if they didn't succeed. There was no going back now. The storm outside raged as they moved through the darkened path, but in Musk's chest, there burned a fire. The fight for control was far from over. But this time, the rules would change. And Musk was ready to rewrite them. The journey to the facility was perilous. They moved swiftly, but there was a constant tension in the air, an undercurrent of fear that surged each time a shadow moved or a distant sound echoed. The storm outside raged on, but their focus remained singular: infiltrate the enemy's stronghold, retrieve the access codes, and expose the shadowy network controlling their fate. As they approached the facility, the silence of the mountain air seemed to deepen. The wind howled through the crevices, but there was a heavy stillness about the compound itself. Despite its unassuming exterior, an isolated, almost forgotten building tucked away in the middle of nowhere, the facility was a fortress. Musk could feel the weight of it. It wasn't just a place. It was a symbol. A place of power. A place where they'd been planning his son's future, manipulating every piece of his life. There it is, Ava whispered, pointing toward the dark structure in the distance. The facility loomed ahead, a monolithic building, partially obscured by a thick fog that seemed to cling to the mountainside. From the outside, it looked like a rundown research station, forgotten by time. But Musk knew better. Every inch of that building was a part of their elaborate web. A web that, if left unchecked, would entangle his son in its threads forever. "Where's the entrance?" Greg asked, his voice low and cautious. Ava glanced around before lowering her tone even further. "There's a side door on the east wing, but it's heavily guarded. We'll have to be careful. They've been monitoring the area closely." Musk nodded. He knew it wouldn't be easy. But this was their best shot. The facility was surrounded by layers of security, surveillance cameras, armed guards, and advanced security systems. But if they could get inside, they could access the database and take the first crucial step toward unraveling everything. They moved closer, each step calculated, careful not to make any noise that would alert the guards. Ava had mapped out the patrol routes, and it wasn't long before they saw the first set of guards stationed near the entrance. Musk motioned for the team to stop. "There are 2 of them," Ava said, studying the guard positions. "They rotate every 20 minutes. We need to move fast." Musk's eyes narrowed as he watched the guards. He felt the weight of their presence, the knowledge that every move they made had to be perfect. One mistake could cost them everything. "We'll wait for the shift change," Musk said, his voice barely a whisper. "Then we move." The minutes stretched like hours as they waited in the shadows, the only sound the wind and the occasional distant rumble of thunder. Musk's mind raced, running through possible scenarios. If the guards spotted them, they would have no choice but to fight. And that would jeopardize the entire mission. Finally, the moment came. The guards turned, beginning their walk down the narrow path. Ava gave a small nod, signaling that it was time. In a swift, fluid motion, they moved forward. The wind howled around them, but they were silent. Every step was calculated, every movement precise. They reached the door without a sound. Ava worked quickly, pulling out a small device from her pack. 5 seconds, she muttered, her fingers flying over the keypad. The door clicked open. It was simple, a quiet, almost unremarkable motion, but to Musk, it felt like a victory. They were in. The hallway inside was dimly lit, the faint hum of machinery vibrating through the walls. It smelled sterile, like old electronics and chemicals. They moved quickly, following Ava as she led them through the corridors. She had been here before, and it showed. Every turn, every junction, she knew exactly where to go. As they moved deeper into the facility, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. It was as if the walls themselves were observing their every step. Musk had no doubt that the enemy was aware of their presence now. They were too close. Ava stopped in front of a steel door, its surface cold and unyielding. "This is it," she said, her voice barely audible over the pounding of Musk's heart. Musk took a deep breath, steeling himself. "How do we get in?" Ava's eyes flicked to the control panel next to the door. "We need the override codes. They're inside a secure room on the top floor, but that's heavily guarded. We'll need to take out the security systems first." Greg stepped forward, his expression serious. "Let me handle the electronics. You two cover me." Musk nodded, giving Greg a quick look of appreciation. They didn't have much time. The team spread out, taking position near the door. Musk kept his eyes trained on the corridor ahead, every muscle tense, every sense alert for any sign of movement. Ava stood next to him, her posture rigid, eyes scanning the shadows for any threat. Greg worked quickly, his fingers flying over his equipment. The sound of keys clicking and whirring machinery filled the air. Sweat beaded on Musk's forehead, and every second felt like an eternity. But the door didn't budge. They needed to move, and fast. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the intercom. "We've got movement. Lock down the perimeter. Get the backup units in position." Musk's blood ran cold. They were found. The enemy had been waiting for them. "We're not alone anymore," Ava whispered, her voice tight. "We need to act fast." Greg's voice was calm but urgent. "Almost there." Musk's eyes flicked toward the entrance. He could hear the faint sound of footsteps echoing down the hallway. He had seconds, just seconds, to make a decision. "We need to move," Musk said, his voice firm. "Greg, get that door open. Ava, you take the left, I'll take the right. We'll cover you." Ava nodded without hesitation. She was ready. So was Musk. With a final click, the door to the control room opened. "Go," Musk ordered. They stormed into the room, the adrenaline surging through their veins. Musk's mind was focused entirely on one thing: getting the access codes and stopping this network from growing any stronger. There was no room for error. The first guard turned, reaching for his weapon, but Ava was faster. With precise, deadly force, she disarmed him in a swift motion. Musk shot forward, taking down another guard just as Greg pulled up the access codes on his device. "We've got it," Greg said, his voice sharp. "Let's go." But before they could make their exit, a loud, booming voice echoed through the facility. "Get them. They can't leave with that information." The door slammed shut behind them, and they were plunged into darkness. Musk's heart raced. The fight had only just begun. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The sudden slam of the door echoed like a thunderclap, rattling Musk's bones. The adrenaline surged through his veins, but now there was no time to think. The mission was no longer about subtlety. It had turned into a race for survival. "Go!" Musk barked, his voice a mixture of command and urgency. He didn't wait for confirmation. He knew Ava and Greg were already on their feet, reacting as fast as he was. They had the codes, now they had to escape before the whole facility descended into chaos. Musk didn't look back. He couldn't afford to. They sprinted down the dim corridor, the harsh, mechanical sound of the security alarms filling the air. Their footfalls echoed loudly, betraying their every move. It wouldn't be long before the guards reached them, and when that happened, all bets were off. "We're outnumbered," Ava said between breaths, her voice tight with urgency. She looked over her shoulder, but there was no sign of the guards yet. "We need to get to the extraction point, now." "How far?" Musk asked, keeping his focus ahead, scanning for any signs of an exit. "2 levels down," Ava replied, her pace never faltering. "We'll need to bypass a few security checkpoints, but we can make it." Musk's mind raced as they turned the corner and slid into a narrow, dimly lit passage. Every moment felt like a countdown. He could feel the weight of the access codes in Greg's pocket, the key to dismantling everything. But they weren't safe yet. They needed to get out. And fast. "How long before they lock us in here?" Greg asked, glancing around as they ran. His eyes were sharp, calculating every detail, already planning their next move. "They'll lock down every exit within minutes," Ava replied grimly. "That's why we have to get to the lower levels before they can initiate the final lockdown. If we can get into the maintenance shaft, we can slip out unnoticed." Musk pushed himself harder, every muscle in his body screaming for relief, but there was no room for weakness now. His mind was on his son, on the battle they were fighting, not just for their own lives, but for the future. If they didn't stop this, the world would change forever. The next corner was approaching. Ava held out a hand, signaling them to stop. Musk's heart hammered in his chest as they all crouched behind the steel door. There was no way out unless they made it past the next security checkpoint. "Can you hack this one, Greg?" Ava asked, her voice low. Greg pulled out his equipment, his fingers working rapidly over the device. "Give me a second," he muttered, eyes fixed on the screen. The tension was palpable as every second dragged by. Musk could almost feel the heat of the approaching danger, the echoing sound of guards' boots growing louder with every passing second. "Got it." Greg's voice rang out with a note of triumph. The door hissed open, and they slipped through into the next hallway. "Move!" Ava ordered, and they took off again. As they descended further into the complex, Musk's mind raced through the information he had learned so far. The encrypted data they'd stolen was crucial, more than just a weapon against the shadowy forces behind the genetic project, it was the key to ending it all. The deeper they went, the more powerful the stakes became. But they were far from free. 2 more levels, Ava said, her breath steady, despite the growing danger. "We're almost there." Musk could hear the steady pounding of footsteps behind them, growing louder with every passing second. "We don't have that long." Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered, then went dark, plunging them into a nightmare of total blackness. The sound of heavy doors slamming shut echoed in the darkness. Musk's pulse spiked. It was happening faster than they expected. "We need to hurry," Greg said, voice tight. "They're locking us in." Ava didn't hesitate. She reached for a small device in her belt and activated it, sending a signal to the hidden override system. The lights flickered again, but this time, they stayed on, the security doors creaking as they began to slide open. But the guards were too close now. "Let's go," Musk said through gritted teeth, as he pushed forward. They emerged onto a wide platform overlooking a labyrinth of industrial equipment and high-tech machinery. It was a maintenance area, cluttered with pipes and wires, a far cry from the pristine corridors they'd been running through. But it wasn't the equipment that held Musk's attention, it was the guards now flooding into the area. "Ready?" Ava asked, her gaze sharp as she eyed the enemy forces advancing from both sides. "We fight our way through," Musk said, his voice steely. There was no other choice. They didn't have the luxury of time to find another route. The guards were almost upon them, their dark uniforms blending into the shadows. The escape route was right ahead, but they would need to clear the path. The first guard stepped forward, his hand reaching for his weapon, but before he could react, Ava was on him. With a swift, practiced motion, she incapacitated him, twisting his arm behind his back, forcing him to drop the gun. Musk followed her lead, his movements precise, as if every action had been rehearsed. Greg pulled out a stun gun and fired, taking down 2 more guards in quick succession. But even as they fought their way through, Musk felt the pressure mounting. The enemy was everywhere. They couldn't keep this up for long. "We need that elevator," Greg said, pointing toward a shaft at the far end of the platform. "It's our way out." Musk nodded. "Ava, get us there." They moved as one unit, pushing through the chaos with a single-minded focus. But as they neared the elevator, Musk saw the worst of it, the final line of guards blocking their path. They were out of options. "We're not getting through them without a fight," Ava said, her voice calm but edged with determination. Musk stood tall, feeling the weight of the moment. "Then let's make sure they know we're not backing down." Without warning, he charged forward, forcing his way through the line of guards with a ferocity that surprised even him. It was a blur of movement, punches, kicks, and the sharp sound of fists connecting with flesh. Greg and Ava were right behind him, working in perfect synchrony as they cleared the path. Finally, they reached the elevator. The doors slid open, and they piled in, breathless but determined. The battle wasn't over. Far from it. But they had what they came for, the access codes, the blueprint for the enemy's entire operation. As the elevator doors slid shut, Musk allowed himself a brief moment of quiet. They weren't safe yet. But they had taken the first step toward taking down the shadowy network threatening his son, his future, and the world. The fight was just beginning. And they weren't going to lose. The elevator hummed as it descended through the layers of the facility, carrying Musk, Ava, and Greg deeper into the heart of the operation. The metallic walls seemed to close in around them, but Musk remained focused, his mind sharp with purpose. His fingers clenched around the small device that held the stolen data, the key to unraveling everything. Every layer of security they had breached, every guard they had taken down, had led them here, the final stage of the operation. But it was also the most dangerous. They had the codes, but now they needed to decipher them, and fast. With the clock ticking, Musk could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "We're almost there," Ava said, her voice tight, but resolute. Her eyes were scanning the area, constantly alert. "Just hold on a little longer." Musk nodded, though he wasn't sure if he was reassuring her or himself. This mission had started as a simple act of rebellion, a way to break the chains binding his son to the shadowy network controlling him. But now, as they descended into the bowels of this clandestine operation, it was clear, this was bigger than just his son. It was about a future he couldn't allow to be dictated by unseen forces, a future where power lay not in the hands of a few, but of the people. The elevator gave a small, mechanical jolt as it reached its destination. The doors slid open with a quiet whoosh, revealing a stark, sterile corridor ahead. No one was there to greet them, not immediately. Musk's instincts screamed that something wasn't right, but the space in front of them was eerily quiet. Ava stepped out first, scanning their surroundings. "This is it," she whispered. "The control room is right down this hall." They moved cautiously, every footstep calculated. The corridor stretched out before them like a dark tunnel, the lights overhead flickering faintly, as if sensing their intrusion. The walls were lined with more high-tech security systems, each one an obstacle in their path. But Musk wasn't deterred. He had come too far to turn back now. "Greg, get ready," Musk said, his voice low. "We'll need to bypass all the security. Can you handle it?" Greg's eyes were already glued to his device, his fingers flying over it with practiced speed. "Give me a minute," he muttered, the intensity in his voice clear. "I've got a backdoor to this system, but it's gonna be tight." Ava glanced over her shoulder at Musk, her brow furrowed. "We don't have much time. The facility's about to go into full lockdown mode. Once that happens, we'll be trapped down here." Musk's jaw tightened. He knew they had no time to waste. "We push forward. Greg, get us in." For a moment, only the sound of Greg's fingers tapping against his device filled the air. Musk's heart raced as he waited for the signal. The seconds felt like minutes. Finally, Greg's voice broke the silence. "I've got it. We're in." Without a second thought, Musk led the way, pushing through the door that now stood open. The control room stretched before them, a vast, impersonal space filled with rows of screens, blinking lights, and a team of technicians who, to Musk's surprise, seemed completely unaware of the breach. "Stay low," Ava whispered, her movements sharp and deliberate as she led them into the room. They moved swiftly, ducking behind equipment, staying in the shadows. Musk's eyes scanned the room. He was looking for one thing and one thing only, the server bank where the crucial data was stored. "Right side," Ava murmured, pointing toward the far corner of the room. Greg moved toward the server, his fingers already tapping away at his device. Musk stood ready, eyes darting from one technician to another. They hadn't yet noticed the trio in the room, but it was only a matter of time before the alarm sounded. "We've got less than 5 minutes before they catch on," Greg said, his voice tense. Musk nodded. "We can't waste any time." Ava stood watch, her eyes never leaving the room's entrance, while Musk and Greg worked in unison to access the server. The screens flickered, displaying lines of code, and Greg's device hummed with the sound of data being decrypted. "This is it," Greg muttered. "This should give us access to everything. We'll be able to track the full scope of their operation." Musk's heart hammered in his chest. The pressure of the moment was overwhelming, but he kept his focus. They couldn't afford any mistakes. The data streamed onto Greg's device, faster than Musk could process. There were names, dates, figures, all tied to a complex network of shadowy figures who seemed to be working behind the scenes of every major corporation, every government, every scientific breakthrough. Musk felt his stomach tighten as he scanned the lines of information. "It's bigger than I thought," Greg said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They've infiltrated everything. Every facet of society. Musk nodded grimly. We knew it would be. But this is more than just business. This is control. It's not about money, it's about power. But before they could dive deeper into the data, a sudden sound broke through the room's tense silence. A door slammed open from behind them. Move! Ava shouted, her voice sharp as she pushed Musk forward. Greg scrambled to secure the device, shoving it into his bag as the sound of heavy boots echoed in the hallway. The room filled with the unmistakable hiss of locked doors, and Musk's mind raced. They had seconds, maybe less. We need a way out, Musk said, his voice urgent. Back the way we came, Ava replied, already heading toward the door. It's our only chance. But the door to the hall had already slammed shut, sealing them inside the room. They've locked us in, Greg said, his voice laced with frustration. Musk turned to Ava, his eyes narrowing. We have one shot. We can't just sit here. Ava's eyes scanned the room, her mind working quickly. There's a maintenance tunnel under the floor. It's a risk, but it's our only option. Without hesitation, Musk nodded. Do it. Ava moved to the floor panel and started working quickly to unlock it. Greg kept his eyes on the entrance, ready for whatever came through that door. With a final click, the panel came loose. Ava jumped down into the dark maintenance tunnel, and Musk followed close behind. The opening slammed shut behind them, leaving them in complete darkness. We move fast, Ava said, her voice cutting through the pitch-black space. No more mistakes. Musk's heart pounded in his chest as they made their way through the tunnel, the echoes of their footsteps mixing with the distant sounds of the facility's alarms. They had the information they needed. But escaping with it would be the real challenge. The escape had begun, but it was far from over. The tunnel was cold and damp, its walls lined with aged pipes that hummed faintly as the trio hurried through. The air was thick with the smell of oil and metal, but Musk's focus was on something much more pressing: survival. His mind raced, not just with the information they had stolen but with the knowledge that they were being hunted. Every passing moment could be their last if they didn't escape. Ava, always the leader in moments like this, took point, her eyes scanning the shadows ahead. Musk followed closely behind her, with Greg right at his heels, his device clutched tightly in his hand. The sounds of the facility's alarms reverberated in the distance, and Musk knew that it was only a matter of time before they'd be surrounded. The dark tunnel seemed endless, the walls closing in with every footstep. We need to keep moving, Ava whispered, her voice low and urgent. They'll be on us in minutes. Musk didn't need any more convincing. The weight of the data in Greg's bag was a constant reminder of what was at stake. It was the key to dismantling the organization that had held his son, and the world, captive. But now, they needed to get out. The clock was ticking. The further they descended into the tunnel, the colder it became. The path was winding, taking them beneath the foundation of the facility. Musk had no idea how far they traveled, but he could tell that they were deep below the surface now. There were no more signs of human presence down here. It felt like they had entered a forgotten, abandoned part of the world, one where there was no room for mistakes. How much further? Greg asked, his voice strained. He was visibly sweating despite the chill, his hand gripping his bag as though his life depended on it. Ava didn't answer immediately. She was concentrating on the path ahead, leading them through the maze of pipes and debris. I know a way out, but we need to get to the maintenance bay before they lock it down. Musk's heart skipped a beat. What are the odds we'll make it in time? Ava glanced over her shoulder, her expression grim. Slim. But it's the only shot we have. They continued through the tunnel, moving with purpose, even as their surroundings grew more claustrophobic. Musk could feel the weight of the mission bearing down on him, more than just for himself now, but for the entire world. This was bigger than one escape, bigger than one family. It was about exposing a global network that was manipulating every aspect of life. Then, suddenly, the tunnel took an unexpected turn. The path ahead narrowed into a small shaft, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. A metal grate covered the entrance. "We're here," Ava said, pointing to the grate. "This is the way out." Musk's mind raced. "Can we open it?" Ava nodded. "I can do it. Stay alert." She dropped to her knees and quickly pulled out a small tool from her belt. She worked the lock with practiced ease, her hands steady even as the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. Musk's senses were on high alert now, the noise echoing through the tunnel. They didn't have much time. "How much longer?" Greg asked, his voice shaking. "Just a few more seconds," Ava replied, her voice tense. "Keep your eyes peeled. If they find us down here, we'll be trapped." The lock clicked, and Ava threw the grate aside, revealing a small maintenance chamber beyond. Musk could already hear the hum of an old ventilation system and see the faint glow of light from above. It was their escape route. "Move," Musk ordered, and they squeezed through the opening into the maintenance bay. The room was cramped, with old machinery stacked against the walls and cables running across the floor. The air was stale, and the space felt like a forgotten part of the facility. But to Musk, it was a lifeline. Ava led the way through the cluttered space, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of a way out. "There's an access hatch over there," she pointed to a small door on the far side. "It should lead us to the exterior tunnels. We can make our way out from there." As they approached the hatch, a low, guttural sound filled the air, a sound Musk knew all too well. It was the unmistakable noise of the facility's lockdown sequence. He glanced up, his heart racing. "We're out of time," he muttered. "They've triggered the lockdown." Ava didn't hesitate. She moved quickly to the hatch and began working on the lock, her movements fluid despite the urgency. "Keep an eye on the entrance," she ordered. Musk and Greg stood guard, their eyes trained on the narrow door they had just come through. The sound of boots was getting louder. The guards were closing in. There was no more room for mistakes. "How much longer?" Greg asked again, his voice cracking with panic now. "Almost there." Ava replied, not slowing down. She worked the hatch open and then jumped back, revealing a dark tunnel beyond. "Go," Musk urged. "We don't have time." The three of them rushed through the hatch and into the new tunnel, the metallic clang of the door closing behind them. The tunnel stretched out before them like a lifeline. It was narrow and winding, but it was an escape. For the first time in hours, Musk allowed himself to breathe, albeit briefly. But the escape was far from over. The sound of alarms filled the air, and Musk could feel the heat of the situation bearing down on him. The enemy was close, so close. They were tracking them through the tunnels now, and every second felt like a countdown to disaster. Ava turned sharply ahead, motioning them to follow her. "There's a maintenance vehicle up ahead. It should be our ticket out of here." Greg glanced at Musk, his expression filled with a mix of exhaustion and determination. "If we can get to that vehicle, we can make it out of here. But we need to move faster." Musk nodded, pushing himself harder. He could feel the adrenaline surging again, every sense heightened, as they dashed down the winding passage. His thoughts raced, his son, the data, the battle ahead. They couldn't stop now. But just as they rounded the corner, a shadow appeared in the tunnel ahead. Ava raised her hand. "Get ready." Musk instinctively dropped into a defensive stance. This wasn't over yet. And as the footsteps grew louder, the real fight was just beginning. The shadow in the tunnel ahead grew clearer, its form becoming more distinct as the footsteps grew louder. It was a group of armed guards, their faces obscured by helmets, their weapons drawn and aimed. They had been waiting for them. Ava froze, her hand raised in a signal for silence. Musk's heart pounded in his chest as he took in the situation. They were outnumbered, and though they had the advantage of surprise, that wouldn't last long. The guards were already closing the gap, and the walls of the narrow tunnel made retreat almost impossible. Ava's eyes met Musk's, and in that brief moment of silent communication, both understood what needed to be done. The plan was simple: fight, survive, and escape. Go, Ava muttered under her breath. I'll hold them off. Musk didn't hesitate. He grabbed Greg by the arm, yanking him forward. We move, now. The two of them bolted down the tunnel, the sound of their boots pounding against the metal floor echoing off the walls. The guards immediately opened fire, the sharp crack of gunshots splitting the air. Musk felt a bullet whiz past him, narrowly missing his shoulder, and his heart skipped a beat. But they couldn't afford to stop. Ahead of them, Ava had taken cover behind a large pipe, her own weapon now drawn. She returned fire, her shots precise and calculated, forcing the guards to take cover. Musk and Greg kept moving, sprinting through the maze of tunnels, their destination still a few hundred feet away, where the maintenance vehicle waited. Don't stop! Musk shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Greg was panting, his face flushed with exertion and fear. I don't think they'll let us make it to the vehicle that easily. We don't have a choice, Musk growled. We fight our way out if we have to. Just keep running. The gunfire echoed in the narrow space, but Musk was determined. Every step they took brought them closer to freedom, and farther from the hell that had consumed them all. But it wasn't just about escaping anymore. Musk could feel it in his gut, this was bigger than just getting out of the facility. The data Greg had secured, the truth they had uncovered, had the potential to change everything. If they didn't get out now, if they didn't survive, it would all be for nothing. A sharp shout from behind signaled the arrival of reinforcements. More guards were joining the fray, and the situation was getting dire. They were running out of time. Greg, stay close. Musk ordered. Ava's doing her part, now it's our turn. They rounded a corner, and Musk felt a rush of relief as he saw the flickering lights of the maintenance vehicle at the end of the corridor. The vehicle was small, built for quick escapes and covert operations, just the kind of thing they needed. But it was still a long run, and with every passing second, the guards were closing in. Ava's voice came through their earpieces. You're almost there, just a little longer. I can't hold them off much longer. Musk gritted his teeth. We'll make it, Ava. We'll make it. But just as they thought they were in the clear, the tunnel lit up with a series of bright spotlights. Musk's eyes widened in shock. The facility had activated a containment system, huge steel doors were beginning to slam shut ahead of them, blocking off the path to the vehicle. No! Greg yelled. They're locking us in. Musk cursed under his breath. The walls were closing in on them, literally and figuratively. The tunnel was becoming a trap. The maintenance vehicle was out of reach now, and they were surrounded on all sides. He turned to Greg, a sense of urgency driving him forward. We're not giving up. There has to be another way. Greg's eyes darted around. There is one more access point, but it's risky. We'll have to jump onto the maintenance rail system, and there's no guarantee it'll take us where we need to go. Musk didn't hesitate. He knew they had no other choice. Lead the way. They ran toward the small hatch at the side of the tunnel, a secondary escape route hidden in plain sight. As they approached, Musk could hear the distant sound of the guards behind them, closing the gap. There was no more time to waste. Ava's voice crackled in their earpieces, strained but resolute. Get ready to move. I'll distract them for as long as I can. You've got seconds before they lock this down for good. Musk nodded, adrenaline coursing through his veins. On it. Greg yanked the hatch open, revealing a narrow ledge that led to the rail system above. Musk could hear the clanging of metal against metal as the system hummed to life. There was no turning back now. Go! Musk shouted. Greg scrambled up first, grabbing onto the rail system above. Musk followed closely behind, feeling the weight of the situation press down on him with every move. They had no idea where this rail system would lead them, but at this point, it didn't matter. It was their only shot at survival. The guards were closing in fast, their footsteps echoing in the confined space of the tunnel. Musk could see the flash of their weapons, hear the sharp command to stop. But there was no stopping them now. They were committed. As they reached the top of the ledge, Musk looked back for a split second and saw Ava in the distance. She was firing at the guards, buying them precious seconds. But the moment she saw him look back, she shouted. "Go!" Musk's heart twisted in his chest. He didn't want to leave her behind, but he knew there was no choice. Greg's voice echoed in the tunnel, urgent and trembling. "We've got to go now, Musk." Musk pushed forward, not looking back again. They sprinted across the rail system, the cold steel beneath their feet sending a shiver through his body. The path ahead was unclear, but it was moving forward, away from the nightmare. The loud screech of metal on metal filled the air as the maintenance system accelerated, pulling them faster and faster away from the chaos. Musk's pulse raced, but he knew that the real battle was still ahead. They had escaped, but the war was far from over. The data they carried, the truth they had uncovered, would change everything. And Musk would stop at nothing to make sure that truth saw the light of day. The maintenance rail system rattled and groaned as it surged forward, pulling Musk and Greg further away from the facility they had just narrowly escaped. The cold air whipped past them, carrying with it a sense of urgency. Musk's mind was racing. Ava had bought them precious time, but now, they were on their own. The tunnel stretched endlessly before them, a dark path leading into the unknown. Greg looked over at Musk, his face pale but determined. "Where does this thing take us? We can't keep running forever." Musk shook his head. "I don't know. This is the only way out we have right now." He glanced down at the data in Greg's bag, the weight of it suddenly feeling heavier. They had information that could change everything. It was more than just their freedom, it was about exposing an entire global conspiracy. Musk had never felt the burden of responsibility so strongly in his life. The rail system clattered on, its noise echoing through the tunnel, but there was something oddly comforting about it. The familiar hum of the machine made the world outside feel more distant. For the first time in hours, Musk allowed himself a deep breath, though he knew it was only a fleeting moment of relief. "So what now?" Greg asked, pulling Musk out of his thoughts. "We get to the surface, what's the plan?" Musk exhaled slowly, his fingers tapping restlessly against the cold metal. "We have to get to the nearest city, find a safe house. The data has to be decrypted, but we can't do that here." He paused, glancing at Greg. "And we have to make sure Ava gets out safely." Greg nodded, a grim determination in his eyes. "You're right. But how do we even know if she's okay? We don't know what's going on back there." "I know," Musk replied, his voice tight. "But right now, we don't have a choice. We can't go back for her. We keep moving forward." The tunnel began to curve slightly, and the speed of the rail system began to increase. The small compartment they were in jerked with the acceleration, and Musk held onto the metal railing for support. There was no telling how far they would be carried or where they would end up, but it was clear that whatever happened next, they couldn't afford to lose what they had gained. They continued in silence for a while, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Greg, still clutching the device, was doing everything he could to stay focused, to keep their path clear in his mind. Meanwhile, Musk was calculating their next moves, planning each step, despite the chaos that had unfolded around them. Then, without warning, the screeching sound of the rail system grinding to a halt broke the silence, jolting them both to alertness. Musk's eyes widened. "We've stopped," he said, his voice low. "That's not supposed to happen." Greg's eyes darted around the compartment, looking for any signs of danger. "What do we do now?" Musk's gaze shifted toward the front of the compartment, where a narrow door led to the rest of the system. "I'll go check it out. Stay here. If anything happens, you know what to do." Before Greg could respond, Musk was already moving toward the door. He slowly turned the handle and pushed it open, stepping out into the narrow corridor beyond. The faint glow of emergency lights illuminated the area ahead, casting eerie shadows across the metal walls. The air smelled stale, like the remnants of machinery long forgotten. Musk crept cautiously forward, his senses heightened. The rail system had never been designed to stop in the middle of a run. Something was wrong. A trap? A malfunction? Or something far worse? As he moved deeper into the corridor, a voice echoed down from the shadows ahead. Musk. Musk froze, his heart leaping into his throat. He recognized the voice immediately. Ava, he called out, his voice shaky but filled with hope. Ava, is that you? A figure slowly emerged from the shadows. Ava. She was bruised, but she was alive. Her clothes were torn, her face smeared with dirt, but she was standing tall, her eyes burning with determination. Musk. She said again, a slight smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. You think you've escaped? Musk rushed toward her, his pulse pounding. I was about to ask you the same thing. Are you okay? What happened? Ava nodded, her expression serious. They tried to trap me. I barely got away. I set a few explosives to cover my escape and bought you guys some time. But it's not over. They'll come after us. Musk felt a wave of relief wash over him. We've got the data. We need to keep moving. Now that we're together, we stand a better chance. Ava glanced over her shoulder, her gaze wary. We have to find a way to get out of these tunnels and to the surface. They'll be locking down everything soon, and we can't be caught. Greg appeared at the entrance to the corridor, his face lighting up with relief as he saw Ava. You're okay, he exclaimed, running toward her. What now? What's the plan? Musk stood tall, feeling the weight of their mission press upon him once more. We need to get to the surface, find a safe house, and then figure out how to decrypt this data. We've got a long road ahead of us, but we can't stop now. Ava nodded in agreement, wiping the sweat from her brow. Then let's move. There's no time to waste. Together, the trio continued forward through the maze of tunnels. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear, they were no longer just trying to escape. They were fighting to expose a truth so dangerous that it could change the course of history. And no matter what, they couldn't let anyone stop them. As they moved deeper into the unknown, Musk couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The quiet hum of the tunnel systems and the faint metallic echo of their footsteps made the air feel heavier, more oppressive. Every corner they turned felt like a step closer to either salvation or doom. But one thing was certain, they were no longer running from the darkness, they were charging toward it, ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead. The trio had moved swiftly, navigating the dark, winding tunnels with a determination that kept the shadows at bay. The hum of the underground system now felt like a distant memory, replaced by the constant crunch of their footsteps on the cold, metal floor. The farther they ventured, the more the air thickened, like a warning, danger was closing in on them. Musk led the group, Ava close behind, with Greg bringing up the rear. Despite the relative silence, Musk couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that they weren't alone. Every so often, the hairs on the back of his neck would stand up, a sudden chill running down his spine. We're getting close, Ava whispered, her voice low. There should be an exit just ahead. We need to be ready for anything. Greg's eyes were wide, scanning every corner. This place feels off. Like we're being followed. Musk clenched his jaw. Stay alert. If we're being watched, it's too late to turn back now. They pressed on, each step bringing them closer to the surface. The exit was within reach. But then, a sound, faint at first, cut through the stillness of the tunnel, a series of muffled footsteps. They stopped. The sound didn't echo, it was too deliberate. They were being stalked. Ava, ever the tactician, motioned for them to stop. Her face was pale, but her eyes were sharp. "We're not alone." Musk's heart skipped. His first instinct was to fight, to make sure they didn't lose the only opportunity they had, but something in Ava's expression told him to wait. Ava crouched low, her movements fluid and precise. She turned to Musk, her voice barely above a whisper. "We don't know who's out there, but it's not the usual security forces. These guys are more trained. Whoever they are, they know how to move in the dark." Musk felt the familiar burn of adrenaline rising. "How many do you think there are?" "I'd guess 3 or 4, she replied, still focused on the shadows ahead. "Maybe more. But they're good at staying hidden." Musk's mind raced. If they had been followed this far, it could only mean one thing: they were dealing with someone powerful, someone who knew what they had uncovered. Someone who didn't want them to reach the surface. Suddenly, a figure moved in the shadows, just a few feet away from them. Ava's eyes snapped to it, and without a second thought, she raised her weapon, pointing it at the figure. "Stop right there," Ava's voice was sharp and commanding. "Who are you?" The figure didn't move for a moment, and Musk's heart thudded in his chest. Were they about to face off with another enemy? Then the figure stepped into the light, and Musk's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't an enemy. It was someone they both recognized, a familiar face, someone from their past. Well, the figure said, his voice a mixture of amusement and something darker. "I didn't expect to find you here, Musk." It was a man, tall, with graying hair, sharp features, and a demeanor that screamed authority. His name was Hunter Pierce, a former associate of Musk's, and someone who had once been considered an ally. That was, until the alliance fell apart under mysterious circumstances years ago. "Ava." "Greg," Pierce continued, his smile cold and calculating. "It's been a while. You've been quite the problem for some very powerful people." Musk's fists clenched. "Pierce. What the hell are you doing here?" Pierce's smirk deepened. "What am I doing here?" "I should be asking you that, Musk. You're stirring up things that are far beyond your pay grade. Don't you understand what you're dealing with? This isn't just some corporate conspiracy. It's bigger than you, bigger than anyone." Ava raised an eyebrow, her gun still aimed at Pierce. "What do you want with us?" Hunter's expression shifted, becoming more serious. "I'm not here to fight you. Not today, anyway. But you're playing with fire, and that fire is going to burn more than just you. You've uncovered something that was never meant to be found. People have been watching you for months, waiting for the right moment to take you out." Musk felt a rush of anger. "Then why didn't you stop us before? If you knew what we were after, why didn't you stop us earlier?" Hunter took a step closer, lowering his hands in a gesture of calm. "Because I wanted you to find it. You've opened the door, and now it's too late to close it. The people you're up against, they're not the kind of people you can just run away from. They won't stop until they have everything you know, and by then, it'll be too late." Greg shifted nervously. "So what, you want to join forces with us now? After all these years?" Pierce glanced at Greg, then back at Musk, his expression unreadable. "I'm not here to join you. I'm here to warn you. But trust me, your best bet right now is to put the data in the hands of the right people, people who can fight back against this system." Ava stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "You expect us to trust you? After everything?" Hunter's face softened, just slightly. "I don't expect anything. But I know you're running out of options. If you keep going like this, you're not just risking your lives. You're risking everything." Musk's thoughts swirled. Pierce was always a wild card, he had his own agenda, and Musk knew better than to trust him blindly. But his words had weight. Whoever they were up against, they were powerful. Too powerful for just a small team of rebels to overcome. Musk looked at Ava, then at Greg. They needed to make a decision, and fast. Do we trust him? Musk whispered, his voice low. Ava's eyes flicked to Pierce, then back to Musk. We don't have a choice. If he's right, we need to regroup and figure out a better strategy. Greg, though reluctant, nodded. He's our best shot at survival. Musk exhaled, a feeling of resignation settling in his chest. All right, Pierce. We're listening. But you're on a short leash. Hunter Pierce's lips curled into a thin smile. Good. Let's move, then. We've got a long road ahead of us. Without another word, Pierce turned and led them deeper into the shadows. The silence of the tunnel closed in around them again, but now, it felt different. They weren't alone anymore, there was someone with them who knew this world, who understood the game they were now forced to play. But whether or not they could trust Pierce, only time would tell. And the truth they carried was more dangerous than ever. The darkness of the tunnel enveloped them once more as Pierce led the way, his silhouette barely visible ahead, a fleeting shadow against the eerie, flickering lights. Ava, Musk, and Greg followed close behind, the weight of uncertainty hanging heavily in the air. Each of them was grappling with the gravity of their situation. Despite the tense silence, one thought was constant in Musk's mind: they were on the verge of uncovering something monumental, something that could either change the world or tear it apart. Pierce moved swiftly, his steps precise, as if he had walked these tunnels countless times before. The others, though hesitant, did their best to keep up, carefully avoiding any unnecessary noise. The hum of the underground passageway had taken on a more foreboding tone now. It felt like a heartbeat, pulsing steadily, almost as if the tunnel itself were alive, watching them. After a few more minutes of winding corridors, Pierce finally stopped. He turned to face the trio, his face illuminated by the dim, flickering lights above. We're almost there, he said, his voice calm but carrying an edge. There's an exit a little farther along. But before we leave, there's something you need to know. Musk raised an eyebrow. What is it? Pierce's gaze darted between the three of them. The people who are hunting you, they know about the data. They've known for a while. And they've already begun moving their pieces into place. Ava's hand instinctively went to her weapon, the tension palpable in the air. You said we were running out of time. What does that mean? Hunter's expression hardened, a flicker of something like regret in his eyes. It means that even if you escape here, it won't be enough. The data you have, what you've uncovered, goes far beyond just corporate corruption. There are people in power, people with resources and influence, who will stop at nothing to keep it hidden. Greg swallowed, the weight of Pierce's words settling into his gut. How do you know all of this? Who are these people? Pierce didn't answer immediately, instead, he looked over his shoulder, scanning the tunnel with sharp, calculating eyes. The noise of distant footsteps echoed ominously in the distance, a reminder that time was indeed running out. They're a shadow network, he said at last, his voice dropping to a low murmur. A group so deeply embedded in every level of power, political, financial, and corporate, that they can erase anyone who gets in their way. What you've uncovered isn't just a threat to their plans, it's a direct challenge to everything they've built. And believe me, they won't hesitate to burn the world down if it means protecting their secrets. Ava, her hand still on the grip of her gun, shot him a skeptical look. And you know all of this how, exactly? Pierce's lips twisted into a grim smile. I used to work for them. I was a part of their machine. But when I started questioning things, when I started seeing the truth for what it was, I became a target. I've been on the run for years, staying one step ahead of their reach. They don't forget people like me. Musk felt a flicker of recognition. So, you're telling us we should trust you because you've run from them before? Pierce's eyes met Musk's, his gaze intense. I'm telling you that if you don't trust me, you won't make it out of here alive. I know what you're up against. And right now, I'm the only person who can help you survive long enough to get the data to the right people. There was a pause, a heavy silence. Ava shifted uncomfortably, her fingers twitching at the handle of her gun, while Greg chewed nervously on his lip. Musk, however, stood still, weighing Pierce's words carefully. He had no illusions about the man in front of him. Pierce was dangerous, he always had been, but his information had weight. This wasn't just a matter of survival anymore. It was about playing a game that was bigger than any of them. "All right," Musk said finally, breaking the silence. "We'll follow you. But make no mistake, one wrong move, and I'll end this right here. We're not going to end up like you, used and discarded." Pierce's face softened slightly, as if he understood the unspoken promise in Musk's words. "Fair enough. But you'll need to move fast. We're running out of time." They continued their journey through the winding tunnels, the air growing colder as they ventured deeper into the underground labyrinth. The faint smell of metal and dust filled their nostrils, mingling with the occasional flicker of overhead lights. The farther they went, the more isolated they became from the rest of the world. It was as if they were stepping into a different reality, one where every decision could cost them their lives. After what felt like hours of navigating the labyrinthine tunnels, they reached a metal door at the far end of the passage. Pierce paused in front of it, turning to face the others. "This is the last stop," he said quietly. "Beyond this door is a way out. But be warned, it's not safe. The people hunting you have eyes everywhere. Once you step through, there's no turning back." Musk's heart rate quickened. "What's behind this door?" Pierce hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward and pressed a hidden button on the side of the wall. The door slid open with a low mechanical hum, revealing a dimly lit chamber beyond. Inside, there were rows of servers, cables snaking across the floor like veins in a body. The room was a stark contrast to the cold, metallic tunnels outside. The hum of technology was soothing yet ominous, the quiet heartbeat of an operation that spanned continents. "This is where it all started," Pierce said, his voice echoing in the empty room. "This is the nerve center. The place where they monitor everything, control everything." Greg stepped forward, his eyes wide. "What is this place?" Pierce's face hardened again, his demeanor growing more serious. "This is where they've been keeping the data you need to expose. And it's also where they'll be coming for you. If we're going to survive, we need to get in, grab what we can, and get out before they lock everything down." Ava's eyes narrowed, her gaze flicking between the server racks. "This doesn't feel right." "I agree," Musk said. "But we don't have a choice. We need that data." They stepped cautiously into the room, the tension palpable. The noise of their footsteps echoed in the enclosed space, a constant reminder of how exposed they were. Every moment felt like it could be their last. The stakes had never been higher. And as they moved deeper into the nerve center, Musk couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to cross a line they couldn't uncross, one that would drag them further into the heart of a conspiracy that had already consumed far too many lives. The hum of the server surrounded them, a steady, almost hypnotic beat in the otherwise silent room. It was as though they had entered a different world entirely, one filled with secrets, data, and power. The walls, lined with rows of glowing screens and blinking lights, felt both intimidating and awe-inspiring. This was the heart of the operation, the very place where the Shadow Network controlled the flow of information. Musk moved cautiously toward one of the servers, his mind racing. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but there was still so much they didn't understand. He could feel the weight of their task bearing down on him. They had come this far, but the hardest part was still ahead. Ava was already at one of the consoles, typing quickly. "This place is like a fortress," she muttered, her eyes scanning the data that flickered across the screen. "They've encrypted everything. It's going to take some time to break through." Musk glanced around the room, his nerves on edge. "How much time?" Ava paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "I don't know. The security is top-notch. If we don't hurry, they'll lock us out and we'll never get another chance." Greg stood at the entrance of the room, his posture tense, eyes darting nervously from corner to corner. We should have backup, he said, his voice tight. This doesn't feel right. I've got a bad feeling about this. Stay focused, Greg, Musk said, his voice sharp. We don't have the luxury of second chances. We need that data. The truth is right in front of us. Ava looked up from the screen, her face pale. I'm getting access to some of the files. I think I've found what we need. Good, Musk said, trying to steady his breath. He wasn't sure if it was the fear or the adrenaline talking, but something inside him told him that they were on the brink of something huge, something dangerous. A faint noise broke the silence, footsteps. Musk's heart skipped a beat. Did you hear that? Greg whispered, his eyes wide with alarm. Ava froze, her fingers stilling on the keyboard. It's them. Musk's mind raced. How much time do we have left? Ava's eyes flicked over the files she was working through. I'm almost there, but we need to move fast. The footsteps grew louder, and Musk felt a cold sweat bead on his forehead. They were close, too close. The air seemed to thicken with tension. Every second felt like an eternity. His instincts screamed at him to run, but they couldn't afford to leave without the data. Stay sharp, Musk muttered. We can't afford to be caught. We need to get out of here with the information. No matter what. Ava's hands flew across the console again, her face scrunched in concentration. The tension in the room was palpable, the danger looming closer with every passing moment. And then, finally, the screen flashed, she had found the data. I've got it, she said, a note of relief in her voice. This is it. All the information we need. Musk rushed over, his eyes scanning the files that were now open on the screen. The contents were staggering. Documents detailing the Shadow Network's operations, everything from illicit financial transactions to global espionage activities, this was the stuff of nightmares. This is bigger than I thought, Musk said, his voice tight with disbelief. These people aren't just corporate criminals. They're controlling entire governments. Ava didn't look up from the screen. Yeah, and if we don't get out of here soon, we'll never be able to expose any of it. We've got a limited window before the system locks down. We need to move. Greg, who had been pacing nervously by the door, suddenly stopped, his face frozen in terror. We're not alone, he whispered, barely audible. The hairs on the back of Musk's neck stood up as he turned toward the door. Shadows loomed at the entrance. Figures were silhouetted against the faint glow of the hallway. They had come. Get down. Musk shouted, pushing Ava out of the way as gunfire rang out from the corridor. The sound of bullets piercing the air was deafening. Musk barely had time to react as he dove behind one of the server racks, pulling Ava and Greg with him. The servers rattled as the gunfire echoed through the room. Stay down. Musk yelled, his heart pounding in his chest. The assailants were relentless. He could hear their footsteps now, the sound of boots hitting the floor as they moved in. Ava, shaken but focused, quickly crouched beside Musk. We've got to disable the security system. If we don't stop them from locking us in, we're finished. Musk nodded, his mind racing. Greg, stay low. Ava, help me find a way to shut the doors. We need to lock them out before they get in here. Greg's eyes were wide with fear, but he nodded and crouched down, pulling out a small device from his bag. I'll try to hack into the security systems, he said, his voice trembling slightly. Ava and Musk kept their heads low, peering out from behind the server racks. The attackers were moving closer, their weapons drawn. The tension was unbearable. Time was running out. I've got it, Greg whispered urgently, his fingers flying over the small screen of the device he had pulled out. The doors are locked. We've got 5 minutes before they can force their way in. Good, Musk muttered, trying to steady his breathing. Let's use those 5 minutes wisely. Ava took a deep breath and turned to Musk. We need to get out of here. Now. But Musk couldn't move. The gravity of the moment hit him. This was the point of no return. They had uncovered the truth, but it came with a cost. They couldn't escape without exposing what they knew, and the world they knew would never be the same again. The shadow network was too powerful, and now, they were in too deep. "Let's go," Musk said finally, standing up. "We have what we came for. It's time to expose them." With one last look at the glowing screens, the documents, and the shattered remnants of their once hidden mission, they bolted for the exit. The next chapter would be the hardest, because with the truth in hand, they were no longer just fugitives. They were the target. The real fight had only just begun. The air outside was shockingly cold, a stark contrast to the suffocating warmth of the underground nerve center they had just escaped. The sharp wind bit at their skin as Musk, Ava, Greg, and Pierce emerged into the night. The distant hum of the city seemed impossibly far away, as though they had crossed into another reality. Their hearts pounded, not just from the escape, but from the weight of what they had uncovered and the knowledge that they were now marked targets. Musk couldn't shake the feeling that they had just walked into the eye of a storm. The data they had gathered, corruption at the highest levels of global power, was the kind of secret that could topple governments, corporations, and dynasties. They weren't just running from the people hunting them anymore. They were running from the world itself. Pierce, leading them down a narrow alley, spoke in low, urgent tones. "We can't stop. Not yet. The network's reach is everywhere. If they even get a sniff of what you've got, they'll lock it down so fast you won't know what hit you." Ava, walking at Musk's side, glanced nervously over her shoulder. "So, what's the plan now? We can't keep running forever." "We don't have time to make a plan," Pierce replied, his voice hardening. "You've got what you came for, but it's not enough. They'll come for you, and if we don't find a way to expose this data, they'll bury it and us with it." Musk's mind was racing. They needed a strategy, something to outwit the shadow network before they could wipe out everything they had worked for. "We've got one shot at this," he said. "We need to get the data to the right people, people who can actually make a difference. But who do we trust? Everyone's a suspect at this point." Greg spoke up from behind them, his voice tight with urgency. "What if we leak it? Put it online, let the world have access to it. It's risky, but maybe that's the only way to make sure it doesn't disappear." Musk shook his head. "We can't do that yet. The people who are after us are powerful. If we just throw this out into the open, they'll be able to spin it however they want. We need to make sure it's in the right hands, people who have the power to act on it." Pierce slowed down, looking over his shoulder at them. "There's one person who might help. A journalist, a real one, not some puppet. Someone who has the resources to expose this and survive the fallout." Musk raised an eyebrow. "Who?" "Her name's Allison Hayes. She works for the Global Tribune," Pierce explained. "She's been going after these guys for years, but they've kept her under their thumb. If anyone can make this public, it's her." Ava didn't seem convinced. "You're asking us to trust a journalist? After everything we've been through?" "It's not just any journalist," Pierce said, his eyes narrowing. "Allison is different. She's been fighting this fight for years, and she knows the risks better than anyone. If we can get her the data, she'll make sure it gets out there, no matter what." Musk thought it over, then nodded. "All right. Let's do it." But as they turned to move, a distant noise cut through the quiet of the night, the unmistakable sound of tires screeching on the asphalt, followed by the rev of an engine. A car. Or several. Musk's heart rate spiked. "They're here," he muttered, his voice low and urgent. "Move." They took off down the alley, their footsteps echoing in the empty street. The chase had begun, and this time, there would be no easy escape. The car engines grew louder as they neared the end of the alley. Pierce led them into a side street, a narrow corridor between buildings that was barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. The sound of pursuing vehicles echoed around them, bouncing off the walls, closing in from all sides. Musk's mind raced as they moved. He could feel the weight of the data in his bag, a heavy reminder of just how much was at stake. They couldn't outrun them forever. They had to find a way to fight back, or at least slow them down long enough to make their move. How far to Allison's? Musk asked, his voice tight as he glanced over his shoulder. Not far, Pierce replied, his voice tense. But they'll be tracking us. We need to lay low until we get close. They kept running, the sound of their footsteps mixing with the screeching tires and the growing roar of engines. The city seemed like a maze of dark streets and narrow alleyways. Musk could feel his muscles burning, his breath coming faster as they pushed themselves forward, knowing that every second counted. As they reached an intersection, Pierce held up a hand, signaling them to stop. He gestured to a small building on the corner. That's the place. We go in through the back. Stick together. Musk nodded. They had no choice but to trust Pierce. If Allison Hayes was their last hope, they needed to get the data to her, fast. They approached the building cautiously, slipping around to the back entrance. Pierce knocked twice, then waited. There was a tense moment of silence before a voice called out from inside. Who is it? It's me. Pierce, came the response, his voice calm but laced with urgency. The door creaked open, revealing a woman in her mid-30s with sharp, intelligent eyes. Her features were hard, weathered by years of battling the system. She looked at Pierce with a knowing gaze, then shifted her eyes to Musk and the others, sizing them up. What's going on? She asked, her tone skeptical but curious. Why are you bringing them here? Pierce didn't hesitate. They've got the data. The kind of stuff that will bring this whole system down. We need your help, Allison. Allison's eyes flicked to the bag Musk was holding. Her expression didn't change, but Musk could see the flicker of recognition in her gaze. She had heard of the Shadow Network. Everyone had. Come inside, she said, stepping aside to let them through. But if this is a trap, Pierce, I swear. It's not, Pierce interrupted, his voice firm. They're not the enemy. They're just trying to survive, same as you. You know how dangerous this is. If we don't get this out there, they'll erase everything, and everyone. Allison studied them for a moment longer, then stepped back and closed the door behind them. The room they entered was cluttered with papers, old files, and monitors glowing with news feeds. It was a place where secrets were uncovered and the truth was pieced together from fragments of information. Musk handed her the data, his fingers trembling slightly as he passed it to her. Allison didn't waste time. She plugged the device into one of the computers and began sifting through the files. As the data appeared on the screen, her expression remained neutral, until her eyes narrowed, and a brief but shocked look crossed her face. This is everything, she said, her voice barely a whisper. You weren't kidding. This is bigger than I thought. Musk could feel the weight of her words. This was it, the last step. The moment they had worked for, fought for, and risked everything to reach. Allison looked at them, her eyes determined. I'll get this out to the right people. But we need to move fast. They're going to come for us all. You've just signed your death sentence. Musk nodded grimly. We know. But it's the only way. The countdown had begun. Time was running out. Would the truth make it to the public before it was silenced forever? And who would survive the storm that was about to break? The flickering glow of the monitor illuminated the tense faces of Musk, Ava, Greg, Pierce, and Allison. The data had been uploaded, the world now held the key to a truth so powerful, it could shake the foundations of governments, corporations, and the power players of the world. Yet, for all the weight of what they had done, the silence that hung in the air felt suffocating. They had crossed the point of no return. Allison was focused, her eyes glued to the screen as the data spread across multiple platforms. Every word, every file, and every bit of information was a time bomb ticking down. The world would soon know the truth. There would be no turning back. Are you sure this is the right thing to do? Greg asked, his voice filled with a mixture of fear and doubt. He had been with them through this entire ordeal, but now that they were so close to the end, the weight of their actions was finally settling in. Musk, standing behind him, ran a hand through his hair. The right thing. Greg, this is the only thing. If we don't expose this now, it'll be buried. They'll erase us. Everyone involved. They'll make sure it never sees the light of day. Ava, standing by the window, glanced out into the night. She could hear the faint sound of sirens in the distance, their wail carrying across the city. She had always known that their mission was dangerous, but now that the data was out, the stakes were higher than ever. She turned to Musk, her expression hardening. We did what we had to. There's no turning back now. Allison didn't look up from the screen. There's no turning back for any of us now, either. Once this gets out, the people who control everything won't let it slide. You think they've been keeping an eye on us before? You've just made yourselves the most wanted people on the planet. Musk nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. The information they had uncovered was enough to bring down entire industries, political regimes, and more. There were no safe places left for them. But there was one thing that kept him moving forward, the truth. Have you started the broadcast? Musk asked, his voice steady despite the chaos inside him. Allison finally looked up, meeting his gaze with a calculating expression. It's already started. They'll know soon enough. But remember, the moment they realize we've exposed this, the hunt will be on. They won't hesitate to take us down. Pierce stepped closer, his eyes narrowed, scanning the room. We have to leave now. We can't afford to stay here any longer. If they track us here, we're all done. Musk exhaled slowly, a sense of finality creeping over him. We've already made our choices. We knew the risks from the beginning. Just then, a loud, ominous knock sounded at the door. A single knock. It wasn't frantic or desperate, it was calculated, calm, and deliberate. The room fell silent. It wasn't the sound of someone trying to break in, it was the sound of someone who knew exactly what was going on. Get down, Pierce whispered urgently, his voice barely audible. Everyone instinctively crouched low, trying to melt into the shadows of the room. Musk's heart pounded in his chest. He had no idea who it was at the door, but there was only one way this could go. Don't open it, Allison whispered, her voice tight with fear. But before anyone could act, the door opened, slowly and with a creak that seemed to echo through the room. A figure stepped inside. The man was tall, dressed in dark, tactical clothing, someone who didn't look like they were here to talk. His eyes were sharp, his movements precise. A cold, calculating demeanor radiated from him as he stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. Musk's hand instinctively went to his side, where he knew a weapon wasn't far. But this man wasn't the enemy. At least, not the one they expected. I think you've been expecting me, the man said, his voice smooth but laced with an unsettling calm. Greg, his voice shaky, managed to speak first. Who are you? What do you want? The man's gaze flicked toward Greg. I'm here for the data. I assume you've already put it out there, haven't you? Musk didn't flinch, even as the tension in the room skyrocketed. Who are you working for? The man smirked, revealing a faint scar running along his jaw. That's not important right now. What matters is what happens next. Ava, standing near the window, shifted slightly, glancing nervously outside. And what happens next? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The man took a few steps further into the room, his boots sounding heavy against the floor. You've made quite a mess, Musk. Exposing the network like this wasn't part of the plan. Now you're all in a position where there's only one way out. Cooperation. Cooperation. Musk repeated, his voice low but firm. There's no deal to be made. The world deserves to know the truth. The man chuckled, a soft, almost mocking sound. Truth? You're talking about a war, Musk. You've just declared war on those who control everything. Do you honestly think there will be no consequences for that? No one survives something like this unless they know how to play the game. You've made it personal. Now, we have to see how far you're willing to go to make sure you stay alive. Musk didn't blink. And what do you want from us? The man raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. What I want is simple. You cooperate, you give me what I need, and I'll make sure you don't become the next casualty in this little game you've started. Otherwise, I'll make sure the world forgets you ever existed. It's as simple as that. Greg's voice cracked with a mix of fear and defiance. You think you can just make us disappear? The man's eyes locked onto Greg's. Oh, I don't think. I know. There was a long, tense pause. Musk's mind raced, weighing their options. They were cornered. There was no escaping what they had done. No matter how they played it, the Shadow Network would never stop hunting them. Ava, looking between Musk and the stranger, finally spoke up. What if we don't cooperate? What if we make sure the truth stays out there, no matter what you do? The man laughed softly, a dark glint in his eye. Then you'll die knowing you've changed nothing. The truth is a dangerous thing, and it has a way of vanishing when the right people want it gone. So, make your choice, Musk. I'll be waiting. Musk knew that this was it. The final choice. The last moment of control they would ever have. The truth had been exposed, and the world had taken notice. But it was also clear that no one could be trusted, not even those who pretended to be allies. Get ready, Musk said, his voice cold. This is far from over. The reckoning was only just beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?